across to the next person. Okay, so the gentleman here, Burgundy, and the gentleman in front.
Thanks. So, cards on the table. I've been a pro-Remainer. 20 years I've been here, it was a surprise I ever needed to vote on that. There are a few thoughts ahead. So, one thing, the arguments as if migration is, the economy is a zero-sum game, migration has been shown brought over to help. I think that's a thin argument. The idea that we'll get a great deal with the EU and it's going to be easy, that's proven false. And with an economy 6 times larger than the UK, it's unlikely to happen, I think. The thing I think that I can agree with most of the Brexit people have concerns about this deal is it is a look. And we don't know where it's leading. It might lead somewhere that's a little better for people like me. It might lead somewhere that's a little better for other people. We don't know, and it doesn't feel like a deal at all. It feels like a fudge, and that doesn't seem like a good basis for either. What seems most worrying to me is that this is the biggest decision most of us will ever make in our lives, and most people looking around the demographic of this room, most people, even by the Brexiteers' standpoint, won't be around to see the benefits that they say that we'll see. The people that will be around are people like this young man here.
Maybe I'll ask him a question then.
And,
do you want to draw your question to
and the point is, I can't see how, looking at the demographics, it's not right to say that just like when you have a divorce between people, just when you buy a house, when you do any business arrangement at all, you know what the final deal is before you say, yes, that's the deal. Which leads to the obvious final statement that it seems crazy that anyone would think it's undemocratic to ask the public what they think of the final deal.
The question is not, it's quite clear the vote against this deal is going to be massive. And it may be very difficult for the government to carry on the current course if that happens. I would be very worried if it were to be withdrawn, because this needs to be resolved. We need to move on to the next options. And that is clearly going to be very difficult. The EU will not make further concessions. The Norway option is still open, although I don't know what, that isn't necessarily a customs union, as you suggested. That could be, yes. Sorry, it's a fine distinction, but quite important. I'm worried that whilst I think there is a very strong case for the people's vote, as we're calling it, because this, whatever it is, it will be very different from what was voted on back in 2016, and as you say, Parliament can't resolve it. The problem is that of timing. It's now getting to the point where that people's vote will be very difficult, even if we do get an extension, and I can't see the EU granting an extension of more than a month without a very good reason, because it disrupts the European election. So I do think that the only option which would firstly get agreement from the EU, because Monsieur Barnier has always said they would keep it open for us, and which is capable of securing a majority in the House because it has significant cross-party support, which Mrs May's deal never has had, is that EEA option. And it is largely up to us whether we remain in it. It creates a degree of certainty because we don't then have, it is an immediate new trading relationship rather than 3 further years of negotiation with all the uncertainty that brings.
I do love being in South Cambs because it's full of clever people, but you don't get an easy ride of it, do you? So if I pick a couple of things out of the first gentleman's points around immigration and that debate, I actually think the immigration debate has moved on a long way actually from where it was, because suddenly people realise, oh yes, that lovely nurse, she was Spanish, wasn't she? And oh, my gran needs some social care at home. Oh, they're Portuguese. So I actually think, you know, those horrid posters of, you know, I can't remember what UKIP put up, but I think that genuinely has moved on. And the debate, it's interesting, it's shifted, it's become more about sovereignty and free trade. People don't seem to talk about the immigration so much. But I do agree with you, you know, why should democracy end on one day? Somebody did the calculations of how many general elections we've had in as long a time a period, and actually it'll be 3+ years since the referendum. So I agree with that. I don't think democracy ends on one day. And there is a shifting demographic, as you rightly say, about who would be voting. On that, one thing I wouldn't agree to, should it come to a second vote, I don't think we should change the parameters. So if we didn't have 16 and 17-year-olds voting last time, I don't think we should do it this time either. That's a debate for another day. I think you need to be fair. You need to keep the playing field level. About EEA, yes, absolutely, you're right. That would be, and this is, you know, you get quite geeky learning about this stuff. So it turns out we are automatically a member of the EEA, being in the EU. You have to give 1 year's notice if you want to leave the EEA. We haven't done that. Deliberately or otherwise, I don't know, but we haven't. So, oh, damn, we've got national media here. Don't get away with that. But you're absolutely right, and that is something that would give us a bit of breathing space, I think. And I do wonder whether that will grow. Of course, that's just the single market aspect. That isn't everything, but it would certainly be a very welcome lifeline. And the intelligence that we have is that Europe are very willing to extend Article 50, providing it is for a more, not to renegotiate what the Prime Minister has done, but if you want like an off-the-shelf thing, like a Norway or a Canada or an EEA or People's Vote, then they would extend for that purpose.
I'm a bit worried because the whole vote and Theresa May is all about, oh, it's what the people wanted and they've decided and we have now to fulfill the people's will. But I don't feel that's actually being done. I don't know if you've read the newspapers and heard about Aaron Banks, or that both Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson are now implicated in the Mueller investigation in America, all to do with Russia. And the more of this is investigated, the more we see that there might be, quite likely is, a Russian influence, which makes the whole referendum null and void, because it wasn't really our opinion.
It was my opinion. I'm not Russian.
Yeah, it may be, and that's okay if that's how you feel.
Whether the result was influenced, I suppose.
But my problem is that actually being investigated? And the other issue I have is that, as the gentleman before me said, that we are in a situation now when there isn't very much time left to have a people's vote. And if the last people's vote has been influenced, what is to say, if we rush this now, that it won't be even worse this time round?
Okay.
And it really worries me, because my son is at university, he's studying international business. But will there be any opportunities for him in a future past Brexit? Will there be? Will there be options for him to go to Europe and study or work in Europe? Because at the moment, all that is fine for old people. We're gone in 20 years, some of us sooner, hopefully. But for our children, we are making decisions for our children, and I don't feel that anybody really thinks about that in Parliament.
Okay,
that all you do is make decisions and blunder through, as you said earlier. And so please tell me that there is an investigation, that you are looking into revoking Article 50, and that you're being serious about it, because this should be about the future of the whole country and of our children, and not just
follow that.
Okay, hi. I heard a great quote from someone about 6 months ago. He said that basically, previously we were opted in with lots of selected opt-outs of a few things we didn't want to be part of. Now we seem to be opting out and trying to get 5, 6, 7, 8 opt-ins for things we did want to be part of. So I'm kind of really feeling we're not in a better situation than we were 15 months ago, 2 years ago. And I'm also concerned that we might lose Scotland, it might degenerate to the breakup of the British Isles, Great Britain. So I'm extremely concerned, and my belief is that another vote, people's vote, would have a significantly different outcome, given what people realise now.
So the first thing I would like to see, because I've seen some grumpy faces from people with greyer hair than mine, when we're talking about the future. I think everybody cares about the future. And one thing this whole Brexit thing must not do is tear us apart as a society. It shouldn't be about old and young. It should, yes, there are different views, but you get that right across the spectrum.
It's about the fact that they need opportunities. We won't need it
but
when it comes into effect.
All I'm trying to say is I think we have to respect every citizen. A vote is a vote is a vote.
Yes.
And that is important because we can't start splintering our society. But I do get your point in terms of different priorities for people at different stages in their life. On the points around investigating our banks, etc., yes, all of that is ongoing. Do I think right here and now where we are, given that we are literally on the cusp of this deal being voted on or not, do I think even if you know, a whistleblower comes out next week and says the whole thing was corrupt, I think we are where we are now. I think that's, you know, those investigations are ongoing regardless, but I think we are at the point now where we need to make a decision about what we're going to do, and that's what tonight's about to help me, whether it's Norway, whether it's People's Vote, whatever it might be, whether it's accept the deal. I have to tell you I don't feel like that, but you know, it's up to you to convince me tonight if you think I should. But I think we are so far down the road now. You know, there have been investigations, they're looking at fraud, they're looking at overspending. The Remain side, I think, overspent a little bit in some areas. You know, nobody was perfect in this. But the point is that I agree with you completely, that every MP has to look in the mirror and think not just about here and tomorrow and next week, but 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And that's why, for me, the woolliness about the political declaration worries me. Because when I am voting for something, it's to make my country better. Not, well, I hope so, because that is about the future. And the gentleman, I think I probably covered most of your points in my opening, but the bit I'd say about the second vote, I suppose. And you're right, I think people would, well, it would be up to MPs, wouldn't it, politicians, to make sure that people did have more information and had a different set of statistics and information on which to base their vote. But just the other side of the second vote, I described at my Camborne meeting as the genie in the bottle. You absolutely let it out only when there is nothing else left as an option. Because I think, you know, we are broadly very Remain in South Cambs. But, you know, I've been going to see my dad in Wakefield quite a lot recently because he's been in hospital. It's not the same up there. And we must never, ever, ever forget that we are wrapped in a little bubble around here, and the rest of the country does not necessarily feel the way that many people around here do. And we have to try and find, should it come to pass that Parliament, you know, gridlock, we can't, there's no option but people's vote, we have to do that really sensitively. Because otherwise you risk telling people that they were wrong or they were stupid, and it's none of those things, it's just different information now.
I'm Deborah Roberts, as you know, maybe other people in the room know, and I live in Falmere. I'm one of those dreadful people, one of those ignorant people, old ignorant people, that voted to leave, and I'm very pleased that I did so, along with 17.4 million other people. But when I was young, in my 20s, I voted not to remain then. I was a young person, and it was the only thing that I ever agreed with Tony Benn on, because he was very, very, again, staying in. We'd been taken in with a lie by that dreadful man Heath, and then Wilson had to sort it out. But we stayed. Now, I didn't like that, but I didn't kick up a fuss. I accepted it. And what's disappointed me so much now is the amount of people that have not accepted democracy. A vote was taken, a people's vote. It was ordinary people like all of us in this room today. We take a decision, we did it. There's a very good quote on the front of the Telegraph. Sorry it's not The Guardian, but it's today's. Brussels has screwed Britain. Remainers have screwed the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has screwed the Leavers. The result is that the establishment has screwed the public. And that's exactly what is happening. I'm afraid that it's been a cock-up from the word go. The Prime Minister is basically a Remainer. She, instead of accepting the fact that we had 17.4 million, which was a percentage, quite a clear percentage, of people who had looked at it, maybe many years like I had, we decided to leave. And instead, she has fumbled, she has blundered, she has been dogmatic, she has been bully boyish with everybody but the European partners. Now, I am of the opinion now, like you, that the men in grey suits are now coming for her.
So could you draw it to a question, Deborah?
I will. The men are coming for her. Whether she will have that meeting next week with the actual vote, I doubt now. But if she does, it's going to be, a majority is going to go against her. Maybe not as huge as we think it's going to be, because I think people will malinger. However, I think then there is a good chance that she will have to go, and somebody else. If it was to be that she has to go, that she decides to do the decent thing which she should have done 18 months ago, and actually resign, who do you think should take the helm? In my opinion, in my opinion. I'm afraid it has to be a Brexiteer. It has to be somebody who believes in the project. So who's going to do it?
All right, fair enough. Go on.
And it might have been a joke, but the alternatives are bigger jokes.
Good evening, Heidi.
He's got a notebook. He's prepared.
It's very, very short. Good evening, Heidi.
Hello.
I'm trying to look forward.
Good.
And one of the issues people have been struggling with is freedom of movement. And I think that the commentators have been rather glib in saying that under the Norway option, we have to accept freedom of movement. That is factually incorrect. If you look at the agreement Norway has, there are some very interesting restrictions on how people can come and live and come and work in the country. And they're very sensible restrictions. And I think it would be helpful for people to look at that in detail. And indeed, I was in touch with Oliver Wright at the Times, who agreed with me, actually under existing EU rules, you're allowed to have restrictions on freedom of movement, as exercised by Belgium. And one of the issues, the problems, is that you need identity cards. However, I think I would like people to look more closely at the Norway option and the restrictions that are there, because they've been very well negotiated. The second brings me to my second very short point, which is I wish people would stop talking about this as being a deal. I spent 35 years negotiating international contracts.
Are you still available?
Well, unfortunately, I'm an expert in law and finance, so they probably wouldn't need me. But for me, a deal is where two parties, usually of equal stature, come and negotiate a transaction with interests on either side. And I wonder if it's escaped people's notice that 27 countries took about half an hour of briefing from Michel Barnier to rush to the table and sign this agreement, because they knew that the EU has given nothing away, and that we have unfortunately been completely rolled on this, paying 50 million up front and having no negotiations. Sorry.
No, not at all, not at all.
Absolutely.
So, well, so my memory doesn't forget, I'll take those in reverse order. So, I mean, that's essentially what I said, wasn't it? Giving our negotiating hands away. You know, it'll be too late. And it isn't. There's a deal to come out, but there's no deal to go forward, so I agree completely on that. The Norway part about free movement, you are absolutely right. I was being slightly flippant about Liechtenstein having 12 people, but in all honesty, you know, those fallback clauses are there. The problem is they're untested, because a country our size with our economy has never asked that question in a Norway type environment in terms of could we have a break on freedom of movement. But it is there, it is absolutely there, you're absolutely right. And indeed within the EU there were more levers at our disposal than we chose to use.
Yes.
But you know, we are where we are now. Although for me, as I say, I think the freedom of movement piece has moved on a little bit. I think because the economy is better in the country now than it was then. People don't see their jobs being taken.
And in Europe as well.
So I think the situation is better. Coming on to Deborah's question, who would I choose? Goodness me, wow.
So who would pull everybody together, do you think? in the Tory party?
Well, the first question to ask, of course, is whether should the deal or the vote be lost next week, assuming it happens next week, would the next thing that the Labour Party do be a vote of no confidence? And, originally we thought they were going to do it straight away, now suggesting they might linger a little bit. Regardless of when they do it, I actually think the Prime Minister would get through that, if I'm honest. Because there are as many Labour MPs who are as terrified of Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister as there are Tories. And that's a fact. You know me, I work for this party, I talk to people. So I genuinely don't think it would come to pass. I think far more likely it will be done not as a consequence of a no vote confidence, but by some of my delightful colleagues putting in letters to Graham Brady. I don't know that there is a person I could think of that would pull the party back together. Being absolutely honest with you, I think this is a fissure now that, this boil has been birthed, hasn't it? And the Labour Party as well, it's not just the Tories that are really split on this. This whole thing has just opened a can of worms. And I'm not sure you can put them back in now. So if you want me to know, if you want to ask me who I would like, I would say Amber Rudd. But whether she would command the backing of the whole Tory party is a different question. Because of all the Brexit Remainer dynamics that are now out of the can. But that would be my choice. Less Boris, so I would say.
Justin.
Yeah, or Justin Greening. Yeah, Justin Greening.
Something I think has been a little bit overlooked is the wider world in this debate.
Yeah.
Putin, Trump, chaos, totally breaking all the rules. We need to be part of a strong group. Trade. I don't think many people in the room would have witnessed war. It's horrible. It'll come if we don't. If we split up. So we need to be strong. I think also that if we had lots of referendum and listened to coin a phrase, the mob, we'd still be hanging people. Politicians decided that the mob was wrong and they were right. You could do the same.
Edmund Burke.
Good evening. Hello. The first point I'd like to make is on the second referendum, or the people's choice. And there has been a lot of people making comments reference democracy. I view it in a simple way. We took a decision, the country voted. If we use a scenario of buying a car, we decided to buy a car, but we didn't say what car we wanted. We've asked the MPs to get us the deal, and if they come back with a car that we don't want, we do have the right to say that car's not suitable, go away and get another one. You are representative of the people. So my question to you, Heidi, is do you think, after the kerfuffle of the last 2 years by the Conservative Party, it's time for a cross-party to find a suitable deal that the people accept?
I'm not sure how to answer the not hanging people question, other than I have been quite tempted recently, it's fair to say. But I do agree with your point. The world through technology and comms and travel is getting smaller, not bigger, isn't it? And I do believe that we should collaborate and be part of international relationships. And that's, last night, I don't know if any of you saw, I think it was the main news, not Look East. There was a chap at Addenbrooke's who had a particularly rare cancer, and T cells or something, they'd done something really innovative with the therapy, and it had to be sent, these cells that were taken out of his body, had to be sent to the Netherlands to be something fancy and dry ice and then come back again. And I sat there to film, I'm like, why are we leaving? I mean, that was just for me, in a snapshot. Innovation, and we are right at the heart of it here, to be fair, in South Cambs, but that being part of something bigger. And to be fair, I think with the Prime Minister's deal, she has tried to opt back into some of those things, but I do agree bigger is better in this modern world. The second point about cross-party, I don't know about so much getting. I agree with a cross-party approach. I said that at the time when the referendum. Not actually the referendum result being so tight, but after the general election result, to me that was just shouting out coalition, national government of unity, because I didn't think the coalition government did a bad job. You know, it was during that period that I thought about becoming an MP, because I thought, well, you can do stuff, and I'm a natural cross-party. I'm interested in the right idea. I don't actually care who comes up with it, to be honest. So I would agree with cross-party in terms of trying to find solutions, but trying to find a deal, I actually think, well, the deal, as is such, I don't think will be improved. So for all Jeremy Corbyn's promises I could go back and I could improve on it, I don't actually think that's possible because the EU have negotiated, thank you very much, and now they'll do. So I don't think that can be improved upon. But in terms of finding a solution to this, well, me talking to Chris Leslie, talking to Amber Rudd, talking to Tim Farron, talking to Karen, that is what Parliament is now doing. And that's why, you know, this is parliamentary sovereignty. This is us, uncomfortable though it is, wrestling and fighting and saying we need something different. So I don't think it would change the deal, but cross-party working will certainly, I think, improve the outcome. Because we have to work together. Right, Paul, there's a gentleman with a dark arm just here, and then two in front of him with the sort of the country tweed, I think you would probably call it.
Thank you. Tim Palmer from Cambridge. Heidi, 2 points leading to one question, which I hope ties together several of the earlier questions. You're on record as saying that if Brexit is to be, it should only be if it doesn't harm the British economy. And we've seen, Mark Carney has said, other experts have said that there is no Brexit deal which will not harm the British economy. I do believe that. Second point, the Prime Minister has said over the last couple of days that the problem with the people's vote is that it will divide the nation. The news is we are a divided nation, and maybe we Remainers are the strong, silent types, not like the aggressive Leavers. Okay, sorry.
Coming to Christmas. Christmas is coming. Love bomb. Operation Love Bomb.
But maybe the solution to that is for you and your cross-party colleagues to say, we reject Mrs May's deal, and we believe the thing to do is to remain in the EU, and we take our responsibility as MPs seriously, and this is right for the country. Therefore, we do not need to go back to the people and have another referendum, which was very badly formulated in the first instance, left a lot of people who've made their lives here disenfranchised. And if you in Parliament decided to stay without a referendum, yes, the nation would still be divided, but I think we could heal that divide much quicker.
Barnier will take you to pieces if you pull.
People are allowed to ask the questions.
Okay, I'm Dave Brown from Sawston. I find it very interesting that we're here in the village college because the year 11 pupils who were at the time of the referendum, they are now adults of 18. And along with them, there's roughly 600,000-700,000 children each year become of voting age. And at the same time, about 600,000 people unfortunately die. And the Independent published an article by a statistician that showed that the majority for leave will have disappeared by mid-January.
it going to be?
It's going to be an asteroid.
Or an asteroid, yeah.
I just feel that it is democracy that we have another vote.
So they're kind of the same points, aren't they, about whether we have another vote or just stay as we are. And there was, I was on Peston a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of said exactly that. And for those of you on Twitter, I tweeted something very similar just after. You know, when I became an MP, I accepted that I was not going to please all the people all the time, and I was going to get it wrong. I might get deselected. I might not win the next election. But the point is, when you choose to become an MP, or really any role in public service, you're there just to take the blows, aren't you? To take the decisions and do your best and weigh up the risks. And I actually said that I would consider it phenomenal courage if the Prime Minister were to stand up and say exactly that. You know what? This was an advisory referendum. I went away to buy you that car.
It was advisory. It was advisory.
Everybody can ask the questions, but if I can... I need a Burko. Come on, give me a Burko. You know, it was to go and buy that car, and actually you told me you wanted a blue car, and actually all they've got is red, and I tell you what, it's twice as expensive as I thought it was going to be. I believe that those public servants should... We're there to make decisions. But the political reality and the sensitivity you have to have, because we are in this bubble, you know, the Prime Minister is hearing lots of voices that I'm not hearing from constituents and MPs in different parts of the country. And I, principally after a glass of wine, would be competent enough to go, let's just stop it. But actually I think the damage could be enormous. I want to have that courage, I want to be that brave, but I think she's probably called it right. She knows she can't. I wonder in her heart whether she feels it.
Yeah.
But, you know, the vote, democracy is there for a reason, and it's a judgment, isn't it? Has Parliament got it right? Do we need a vote? And it's tough, because we've never done this before. You know, much as I would like to go over the top, put an amendment that just says stop it, I think the damage could be irreparable. But if we position it correctly, if, you know, and this again, remember, it's like genie out the bottle, you know, Parliament has to go through all the stages, I think, before we reach that point. And then we have to do it very, very carefully. Right, let's take Ken on the front row. Come on, Paul, get some exercise all the way down here.
Grey hair, but I have a big genetic investment in the future, and I look after my investments.
Of course you do. And we'll go to this gentleman afterwards.
I think, Heidi, that I sense that the move is coming towards a people's vote. The Economist, who I believe comes out with that this week.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm very worried about that, because it seems to me we live in a parliamentary democracy, as somebody's pointed out, and so we have a vote.
Yeah.
And I think Remain will win. But would they win by 80%? Because if they don't, we would be back to the situation of let's have another one. And whatever people say, even if they say we've settled it for a generation, Scotland has showed us that it's rubbish. You know, within weeks almost, they're back again. The real danger is if it's a inconclusive, by which I mean a majority of less than, say, 75%. Where do we go then? We just go off into another exercise. Do you think that's really worth it? What we need to do is get on and deal with the problems which are hitting the country, not gazing at our Brexit navel.
Thank you, Heidi. There are some friends and colleagues here. I'm a councillor from Duxford. Before I get the rotten tomatoes, I was a Lib Dem, I'm a Lib Dem, and so we very much want to remain. Anyway, where we are, two points that I would, and it also refers to what this gentleman was saying here. If you look what happened in the Scottish referendum, even if you disagreed with Scottish independence, the Scottish National Party wrote a document that was 550 pages long in favour of independence. They put it on the web, they put it in every library in Scotland for people to read, and people made up their mind. What did we get from the Leave campaign? in the first referendum, a number of words down the side of a bus. That's not a reason to plan our future. The second point I'd like to make on Norway, although we are Remainers, in Norway, I don't know if people realise, and if there's any Norwegians here, they've actually had 2, if not 3 votes on whether to re-enter the EU. And they've decided not to do it. And the reason that's important is because you can change your mind. Norwegians have actually not changed their mind. They've decided to stay outside in the European Economic Area, probably a good decision for them. And it didn't split the country. They had a grown-up debate about it. I do accept the point would be very difficult if it's 55-45 or 60-40. Yes, it would be difficult. But if that's the only option left to us, as you said, Heidi, if we cannot get a Norway agreement in Parliament, if we cannot get any other settlement, that is our only option in my view.
I'll answer in reverse again. So I sense the order of events will be Norway will be tested first. And you know, if there was a parliamentary majority for that, I'd probably go for it. Because I want to heal. I want us to start talking about the NHS. And, you know, there's so much that's frozen at the moment because it's literally consuming all the energy in the civil servants. Which is why I keep saying about this genie, and I come to the people's vote as the absolute last chance to do. This is not my choice. I am not active. I don't want it, but I'm accepting that if everything else fails, we might end up there. But you're right, should we? It's the ultimate last choice. It really is, because of all the divisiveness that you talk about. I think the way I reconcile in my head a little bit about how the percentage result might pan out and would you go best of 3 and best of 4, etc. I think because you would be presenting information now of the economy. It's been modelled, you know, what the economy under Theresa May's deal would look like, assuming the withdrawal agreement and the future the declaration of course came to life, versus now. You would have something to present, information. And I think that would change a little bit in terms of the validity of the result, because it is true that on both sides, not just Leave, you know, the campaigning was pretty rubbish last time round, on both sides. And I think, if I'm honest, I think David Cameron was all a bit too flippant and just assumed he'd win. You know, being absolutely honest. And I probably just assumed we'd win, because we're surrounded, you know, by that typical choice in this part of the world. So I think that would be the difference next time. And don't get me wrong, I don't hunger for it, I don't want to, but I tell you what, as MPs would have one heck of a job to, and that starts in local communities. It's all of us. It's not having a fight actually across the aisles. That's how we bring the country back together. I call it Operation Love Bomb. I try and live my life by it, but it is absolutely about love thy neighbour, and you bring your community back together, and everybody has a responsibility and a role in doing that.
Place up. My name's David Mills. I'm really concerned about the future, but not in the way that everybody else seems to be here. I'm quite concerned that, as you say, Cameron et al. And yourselves, for the last few years, have made quite a mess of the UK. You know, we can get burgled now and the police don't care. The roads have got gang rape holes in it, the National Health Service doesn't work, and so forth. So the UK itself has been ungoverned now, or perhaps has been governed badly by the Tories for quite some time. Now we're getting into a mess with the EU, and we don't have a way out of it. So now how do you propose to draw the MPs together to stop Mr Corbyn getting in? And if it's not him, it'll be Tom Watson. If it's not him, it'll be Et al. Yes, so how do you stop the socialists?
Quick answer. Back to Brexit, I wanted to ask you quickly about the no deal risk. I think you said the Parliament is against it, but as I understand it, they haven't actually voted on it yet. Can you take us through the Benn Amendment and what's going to happen there?
Okay, so I'll take that question first, because I actually think that's easier than how to stop socialists. We really should have finished reading Animal Farm. I would have had the answer. The Benn Amendment, interestingly, a chunk of that amendment is actually what was in Dominic Grieve's amendment. And Hillary has actually retabled his amendment, taking out the bit that Dominic has just secured this week. So the fact, it is a fact that Parliament will not support no deal. There's maybe, I don't know, half a dozen on my side perhaps that would just go full on WTO or out of there, but it is a fact that Parliament would not. So by virtue of the fact that Dominic Grieve's amendment gave Parliament the role to choose what happens next in the case of the deal, of the vote going down next week, we have that, it is secured. And if you cast your minds back to to the summer, do you remember it was a little bit odd at the time? Dominic Grieve it was Grieve 2, he had tabled a very similar amendment then, and then right at the last minute he didn't vote for it himself, and everyone was a little bit confused. We were a little bit confused. But essentially, what he was doing, and he was right to do it, was saying, okay, I don't want to tie the Prime Minister's hands. Let her go and finish negotiating, come back with that deal. I don't want to do anything that would hamper that. And so he did. So this is now return of the Grieve. This is Grieve 3, which essentially is him putting that back in again, saying allow Parliament to have a role if the vote isn't successful. And that's what we have. So that has essentially taken no deal off the table, because Parliament won't accept it. He's a really clever lawyer, actually. He's really brainy. And how to stop the socialists? Well, if you think the Conservative Party is struggling to find common ground at the moment, I have to tell you the Labour Party are in even more of a mess. And I'm slightly flippant when I say, as many Labour MPs don't want Corbyn to be leader as we do, and that is true. It really is. They are, a good third of the party are on the brink of splitting away. So they will stop it from happening, to be absolutely honest. God, I'm giving you all the inside gossip.